So, like I said, this is the Timatic quarterly call. For those of you who are seeing this and surprised, then please be aware it is for all things related Timatic. And so once again, thank you for taking the time to participate in our second quarterly call. And my request would be, if you're not talking, please go on mute. I will be occasionally muting everyone on the line as well. First thing, we hope you're all doing well, staying safe, most importantly, staying strong. These are, I use the word crazy times in our industry. We've all been through a lot. We're all going through a lot, but I think there's some green shoots of recovery popping up bits and pieces everywhere. So I think there's light at the end of a very long tunnel, and we hope we will have the opportunity to meet with all of you in the near future. The way we will run this call, it's slotted for an hour. As I said, I will be muting everyone just to make sure we have a very good quality of the call. But as we are going through the presentation, we will be pausing at certain points, so you could ask any questions. So, of course, please unmute yourself if you want to raise a question. You also have the ability to raise questions in the chat feature, which you see at the bottom of your screens for those who have dialed in on Microsoft Teams. As I said, the session will be is being recorded, so we can share this with other colleagues who haven't been able to make it. So that's basically the way we will be managing the call. One thing I'd like to say is it's not meant to be the IATA/Timatic team talking. There will, of course, be an element of updates we will be sharing with you in terms of what we in IATA, what we specifically in Timatic are doing or have been doing to support you. That should take about 20 minutes or so, but we'd like to spend more of the time talking about things that we believe we could do more. We'd like to hear from you as well on any issues, concerns that you have, any more opportunities that you believe that Timatic is able to help you with. And just for those of you who joined in a little bit later, this is Anish from the Timatic team in Amsterdam. So let me just push through what we have done. Some of you may have seen this in some shape or form, but when COVID hit us in full form around, I would say, mid-February, we rapidly realized that the way we were working can't continue. So we very quickly changed our hours of working. We went to 7-day week. We extended the working hours to try and cover as much of the time zone as possible. And just to give you an indication of the craziness that came our way, and I'm pretty sure you experienced the craziness firsthand as well. We had huge number of updates coming from our sources from all around the world. And we went typically in a day, we do around 60 or so odd updates. At the peak time, we went to more than three times that. As you see on the graph on the right-hand side, the numbers just, it's like climbing a mountain and then climbing down the mountain and then climbing up another mountain. The peak that you see is when the US started implementing all of the travel restrictions. But that is, it was difficult, it was challenging, but I hope you felt that the team was able to step up to meet your expectations. We've had very good feedback, and we thank you for that feedback. It does make a difference to the team. What we also did is we opened up the IATA Travel Centre. For some of you who may know, the IATA Travel Centre has always been a public-facing portal for us, but we didn't really promote it much or update it as frequently. What we realized was because of the intense requirement for travel regulations, we decided to update the travel center every 15 minutes. As I said, it's accessible to the public, and it was referenced by many of you out in the industry. We will talk a little bit more on the travel center in a minute, or in a couple of minutes. However, this is what it's more looking back. Now, that's all history, that's all fine. But what I'd want to now turn the attention on is what IATA is doing to help with the industry restart. We have our colleagues from our facilitation team. They're based in Montreal. And I will ask Celine to walk us through, in terms of from an industry perspective, what is IATA doing from a restart point of view. Once Celine gives a presentation, we will talk some specific things on Timatic, and then we will pause for some questions. But like I said, please feel free to put your questions in the chat, which you see on the bottom of the screen. So with that, I'll hand it over to Celine, who I believe is on the call.
Yes, indeed, Anish. Thank you very much. And I must say that I'm always impressed with the exercise that the Timatic went through, and to try and avoid to have similar situation and firefighting exercises. IATA has drafted a roadmap to restart the aviation industry, taking into account first the challenge, and I think on the next slide, of how to restart the operation while protecting the health and safety of passengers, but also staff, and ultimately to restore the public and the government confidence. So one of the aspects is that we need to ensure that aviation is not a vector for transmission. In the past, we've seen, and well, in the recent month, we've seen that it was not really in terms of contamination within the continuum, but there was obviously concerns that aviation was a vector to transport passengers from people from one place to the other, or one country to the other. So we've looked at a series of measures. Those should be temporarily and lifted when needed. The ultimate goal is obviously to restore the air connectivity, starting most probably within the domestic or regional markets, to expand to international connections, where governments are a bit more reluctant to open their borders. But this needs to be done in a consistent manner with mutually accepted and harmonized approach. And we have engaged on that point at different levels with states to discuss their intent to reopen their borders, but also to discuss the measures they would need to regain this confidence, both at even individual level on a bilateral basis with states, but also at a global level throughout the ICAO platform. One of the arguments we bring up front is really that restoring the operation is a matter of urgency. We present some meaningful key economical data. So not only aviation drives the economy, but it also obviously creates employment, over 65 million jobs, and among them 25 are direct employment. others are induced. Aviation also enables trade. We've seen during the crisis there were need for additional capacities for cargo. It facilitates also the healthcare and emergency aid, and we've been through a crisis in this area as well, as we needed to put tools in place at regulatory level and to allow also you as airline to be able to transport healthcare goods. And obviously it connects people, businesses and economies. And this is important to keep in mind, because as we are looking at the measures that governments could possibly put in place, we need to make sure that they support both tourism and businesses and also family reunion. Looking at the roadmap we've prepared, and you can easily find it also on the IATA.org. We'll be able, I think, Anish, to distribute a copy if it's needed. We've looked at proposing a roadmap with a layered approach. So we've been working with our medical team and trying to identify the measures that could have some degree of impact, and the mitigation measures that, when put in place, would really reduce the risk of contamination, both within the airport environment, but obviously on board as well. This has also led us to explain why it was not required to block the middle seat, for instance, and I guess that's a hot topic that you've been discussing among yourself as well. But we've explained the multiple measures that could allow these those conclusions. So there is no one single solution. It's really a number of elements that, when put in place, can mitigate the risk. And obviously, we are looking at the best solutions. So we've been working on some guidance principle behind the elaboration of those measures. Obviously, we were looking at the measures that governments were contemplating, but not necessarily knowing which one to implement and how and where. So we've been working also with the airport organization, SEI World, and also in the regions to come up with some common elements of mitigation measures. So the first guiding principle was to ensure that to the maximum extent, measures would be taken upstream. So ideally, passengers should arrive at the airport ready to fly, ready to travel. They should, so that goes also through enhanced communication, and to avoid people who know they might possibly be contaminated to even fly. There is a collaboration between government and industry. I mentioned it earlier. It's vital. We cannot just draft a roadmap for airlines and airports if it's not accepted by states. So this document has been shared with a number of countries and regional organizations such as the European Commission or IATA, ICAO, obviously, which has set up a group under the ICAO Council. And the document has been well received. And I must say that in Europe, for instance, the guidelines issued by the European Commission are very close to what we've proposed, and that was already a great step. So this engagement is important. We also want the measures to be temporary. They should be removed, and whenever the risk is gone. And what we are trying to negotiate also with each government is for them to have a clear exit strategy. So in many instances, the measures they will put in place will be triggered by a set of measures and or measurables. So equally, whenever the risk has been lowered and is non-existent anymore, we ask them to remove those measures. And there are we also took as a principle that the roles and responsibilities of governments, airlines, and airports should remain the same. And you've been confronted in your operation, for most of you, to requests from governments that were going beyond your regular operations, including performing some temperature check or getting additional information from passengers and etc. that you would not necessarily collect in the regular course of your operation. So by there, we are also meaning that governments have the responsibility whenever they ask or they require additional measures to put the appropriate financial means in place and have the right workforce to do so. So those were the guiding principle that we had kept in mind to draft the roadmap. And I'll be happy to take some. Oh, sorry, we have an additional slide on the conclusion. Yes, so no single measure can mitigate the risk, and so the layered approach was seen as the best solution to achieve the goal. We've been looking also at short-term and long-term measures. So for now, there is no, it's been part of the discussions, but there's no yet trust in the fact that we can have immunity or that it lasts long enough. But a lot of research and there may be some promising results that are coming. If in the long run there is a way to ensure that passenger or people may have developed immunity, be it through vaccination or through developing their own antibodies, governments may want to set up immunity passport, and this will certainly be a measure that will be introduced on the long run, while the other measures such as the wearing a mask or the health declaration and etc. would be phased out.
Okay, great. Thanks, Celine. So
and this is the last, yes. Thank you.
That's a lot. Okay, we'll pause over here and see if anyone has any questions to Celine and the team from Montreal.
Hi, Celine. Peter from Amadeus.
Hi, Peter.
You mentioned that the EU thoughts on health declaration were similar to what you were recommending as well, or the thoughts of the various groups that you've been working on. Maybe I misunderstood you, but my understanding of the EU requirements is that they put more burden on airlines or system providers to actually collect various bits of health information and provide some kind of a health declaration form, whether it's online, on a phone, or whether it's a paper form. Whereas I thought more the IATA approach was push all that back to the governments and let them provide the wherewithal to collect this passenger information. So maybe I misunderstood you, but That's
No,
my understanding.
no, it's a good point, Peter. And I was referring to the overall set of measures that are implemented before travel, but also within the airport and on board. So not just looking at the health declaration. Now, some countries have indeed implemented, and that was during the crisis, some paper form and required additional work from and duties from the airline, and we are working with those states and the EU to remove this uncoordinated approach. But these were measures that were taken before the Commission issued the set of guidelines. As I think they were published last Thursday, if I remember correctly, and they can be accessed online. We can also share them, Anish, if there are some requirements to do so.
Sure. Great. We have one question, one in the chat from Anna from Delta Airlines, and the question, I'll read it out. My concern will be the onerous request states will ask carriers to do, such as testing to prove not contagious. How are we trying to standardize these requests?
So the testing is not part of the roadmap. I mean, we know that it's part of the options that governments were contemplating, but looking at the medical evidence and the risk for now of a high negative test and also a high level of wrong positive test, which then impacts the passenger process. In this case, the other one introduces a risk. We don't think that it's a sustainable measures for now. It doesn't mean that we completely close the door to such testing. Should there be a golden test, that's a silver bullet test that is able to perform quick test in a reliable manner. But as it stands now, there is no solution that is proven to be efficient and effective.
Okay, thanks, Celine. One more question from Emma Townsend from Fly Dubai. Will IATA publish a COVID-19 health declaration form similar to SARS?
So we are working on the with WHO and ICAO, so the World Health Organization and the International Civil Aviation Organization, which you're more familiar with, on looking at the element, the data element that would be part of a standard form. Although we are trying to do some pushback on the paper forms, because not only it introduce a risk of communicating the disease, but also we saw in a number of cases airlines were asked to have additional duties in the handling of forms, and but that would be useful for the paper form. But also, if we want to automate the filling of the form, if we could have a standardized set of data, that would facilitate the process. So yes, it's part of the plan, and the discussion have been initiated.
Okay, great. We have a few more questions, but in interest of time, what we'll do is that we'll pick those questions towards the end when we have more time left. If not, we will provide written answers back to those questions we haven't been able to address. So thank you, Celine. And for everyone on the call, please do send your questions in through the chat. We will try and get through them as much as we can. Okay.
Thank you.
So now you heard about from an IATA level. What we'd want to do is now go a little bit more in terms of what the Timatic team are doing to support you. I will ask Jody, who you all know, who manages our sourcing team, to give you an update. and then followed by Beata. So Jody, over to you.
Yes, if you can pass on to the next slide, please. Anish?
Yeah.
If you can move on to the next slide.
I'm already on the next slide.
Oh, I can see it. Okay.
I'm on the slide called Global Data Sourcing Network.
Oh, I can't see that. Anyway, hi everyone.
You're not
showing on the
Anish.
screen.
Probably have
Yeah,
to
Anish,
disconnect
you're not.
and reconnect.
So I'm not the only one who's not seeing that.
No, I can't see it either.
Oh, hang on. Houston, we have a problem.
Anish, you're sharing the slides as per our own control. You should control it yourself because right now we can actually move on the slides ourselves.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Can you see the slides now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So just be with me while I click it through. Technology is great when it works. Okay, Jody, back to you.
Okay, thank you. Now, as Anish mentioned, the Timatic team counts with the support of an extensive network of sources. These are 1,700 people with whom the editing team interacts to validate information on entry requirements. Now, these sources vary in nature, but the split is roughly what you see on this slide. Governments in 220 countries and intergovernmental institutions combined make 60% of our sources. These are the agencies that you see listed under the blue and red circles. The remaining 40% are airline staff and IATA co-workers. Now, these airline staff are colleagues of yours stationed at international airports across the globe. And again, this is an opportunity for us to do what we think is easiest, and that is to thank the airlines you all represent for your contribution in that regard. In addition to this, most of you also contribute by sending official documents to the editing team. And although we are often in possession of such documents, we always say it's better to receive them twice than never. So another big thank you for doing that for us. Now, on the government side, our government sources are mainly immigration and border police agents. These are ultimately those who allow or deny entry into any given country. But COVID-19 has also brought new government actors into the thematic scene, namely civil aviation authorities, who often send decrees concerning airport and border closures, and ministries of health. Now, yeah, it's true that we already have sources there, but only in some African and South American countries where yellow fever vaccinations certificates are required. So before the COVID-19, there was no need for us to have health sources in the rest of the world, but things have obviously changed. And over the last 2 months, the editing team received multiple documents issued by CAAs and ministries of health from many countries. So we see this as an opportunity to enlarge our sourcing base, and we are already reaching out to these new contacts to request them to join our sourcing network. Yeah, and that's in that context and in preparation for the restart, today we are sending a message addressed to all our existing government sources and to these recently obtained contacts. The message is available in 3 languages, English, French, and Spanish. You can't see it properly there, but it looks a bit blurred. But in essence, what it says is that in addition to information on travel restrictions for all types of passengers and airline crew, we are also asking them to proactively provide information on COVID-19 specific health requirements. And I know that's been mentioned and it will be mentioned later on. So any health declaration forms, immunity passports, health insurance, whatever document or proof that is required to present either prior to travel or upon arrival. And also information on airport and border closure even if these are tentative, and information on flight suspensions. Now, we know you've been telling us that having access to this data is critical for your operations. And it is true that information related to the bottom of 3 bullets was until recently out of the scope of Timatic, and even though maintaining this data will, we know that for a fact, add pressure to an already very busy team, the good news is that we are going to do our best to continue collecting this information for you. This will be provided, by the way, via the thematic alerts, which Mahir will explain in a few minutes. If you can move on to the next slide, please. Yes. So the other initiative that the sourcing team is working on is the sourcing video. The current video is we thought in any case too long. It's about 4 minutes, and it's outdated both in content and branding. So rather than having one lengthy video, we are now creating shorter ones. This will make it easier for us when engaging with governments. And the split in the content will most likely be like this. The first video will be about the description of Timatic. The second one will be about how the Timatic platform helps distributing their travel requirements in real time to the industry and beyond. And video number 3 will cover the benefits to them and to all stakeholders involved in the process. And the last one essentially will be the call to action. That's it from me. So I think it's time if anybody has any question of what I've presented so far. Now is the time. Otherwise, I think you will have time also at the end of the call.
Yeah, can I suggest one thing? Let's just go through a couple more updates and then we'll pause for questions. So I'd like to just get Beata to give us a quick update on the editing side.
All right, hello everyone. I'm going to give you a quick update from thematic content perspective, since the editing team is getting ready for the COVID rollback. One of the things that we are working on right now is a COVID rollback SOP. This is our internal document, which will be very helpful to ensure that the new travel regulations will be published in thematic in a consistent manner as much as possible, of course. This does not only apply to thematic content, to the responses in different thematic products, but it also is related to the thematic news section, which you have been using quite a lot during the outbreak, as we all know. Another item that we have on our to-do list for the rollback are the customizations. Some airlines requested customizations of thematic responses due to the COVID outbreak, and we will be making sure that whenever countries start implementing new travel regulations, the customized rules will also be removed or adjusted if necessary. So we are going to approach directly airlines that have those customizations in place and decide together about the next steps. Now, in terms of the team's availability, which is bullet number 2 in this slide, even though we do not work on a 24/7 basis, as Anish mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we did cover 4 time zones during the COVID outbreak. And the way we are going to work during the COVID rollback will also be adjusted to the pace of the changing regulations. This basically means that if during the rollback there would be a busy period like the one that we experienced in March, the team will again work in different shifts to make sure that thematic is up to date. So to summarize this slide, the team will be there again to support you during the COVID rollback. And yes, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now, but you, of course, as usual, can contact us via email. That's it for me for now.
Okay, thanks, Beata. We see there's a couple of questions, quite a few questions regarding crew information. Can I suggest we hold onto those questions until we come to thematic alerts, which we will be discussing in a few minutes, and then we'll address it at that time. But does anyone else have any questions to what Beata or Jody have provided? Okay, silence is good sometimes. Okay, so let's move on. I'm going to ask Maren to give you an update on the travel center. As I mentioned, we had opened it up, but I get Maren to explain what are we doing now, or rather what we have done with the travel center. Maren, over to you.
Hello, everyone, also from myself. Thank you for joining the call, and I've been in contact with most of you, and really great to see you on the call. I just want to quickly update you on the travel center, which got a lot of attention, not only from you, also from the public. And as Anish mentioned earlier, this is our public-facing website. So in the past, we provided here and there information, but didn't really keep up to date the news, etc., which you can receive through the products. So, but this is a very, different situation we were facing. And because we also wanted to help you, that customers and passengers can inform themselves before they go to the airport, especially when everything started to be getting very, very crazy. In Europe, it was end of January. In Asia, it started before. So that was one of the possibilities where we thought we can provide this information to passengers as well. And as most of you remember, we started with just a couple of countries listed under the news section with COVID-19 information. But as you remember, it went from one day to the other into a long, long list. And thank you again for all the feedback we received also during this time. So we started to add a couple of things. We added information when we published again the country. It was easier for some of you to get that information and spread it among your colleagues for different purposes. But officially, as you know, this is a public-facing website, and we got a lot of feedback as well from passengers. And so we said, okay, let's try to visualize this better and make it a little bit more user-friendly. So after we created a long, long list, and as you remember, countries change sometimes 5 times a day. The regulations, it was really, really hard to figure out what changed. We decided not only providing the text, as you can see. So for the ones who didn't see that map, if you click on the country, you still have the text displayed what we had before, but it's only displayed for the country you click on. In this case, it is Spain, but of course, any other country listed here has got information, except as you can see from the legend at the left-hand side, some countries are still reviewed and we're still waiting for information, but all the other countries, we've got information, and that makes it much easier for passengers, of course, to see quickly, can I go there, can I not go there, is it totally restrictive? And what we did with the editing team, and this is also thanks again for the team, because it's a lot of manual work we have got in place. So every time our editing team is updating the information, we have a methodology in place, which kind of categorize the countries in these 4 categorizations you see there. So we've got, of course, the dark blue, it's the totally restrictive, then the partial restrictive. It means like some passengers go in, depends on what kind of criteria they have. And then we still have countries like the UK, and everyone is still puzzled about this. They don't really have COVID information regulation in place. And as I mentioned before, we still have countries where we wait for feedback, especially concerning COVID-19 information. So as you can see, it's a very blue map. And as we think, like Beata and Jordi already said, we prepared for the rollback. And so every time, and this is very, very critical, once we roll back, hopefully soon, the colors will be changing very, very quickly. So it's easier also for any passenger who can go to this map to see, okay, so the country was maybe totally restrictive before, but they're loosening up. So I click on this and then I can see the text on the right-hand side. Yes, I can see the comments on the side. Yes, we've got the whole map there, but of course you have to zoom in on certain countries, especially islands. You have to zoom in, and some countries in Europe, it's a little bit tricky But I think the overall picture is there. So it's like, yeah, you don't have to think about what that means. And I hope that's very useful for you and your passengers, because again, it's a public facing site. We want to help you, that your passengers know what they're expecting if the travel regulations are loosening up. Do you have any questions at the moment? I see some comments there. Thanks again. Yep. And Lionel from Etihad and Amelie from Lufthansa, we're looking also into a couple of things again, how we can maybe very, very small territories, how we can make them more visible. So we're looking into the team. Thank you for the feedback. And I know I received a lot of feedback from a lot of you already. But as I mentioned, this is a public-facing website, and this is really mainly concerned to our passengers. But we have a new product in place, and this will be covered very soon, I think in the next slides, by Mahir, which help you as a company to get the information, especially the COVID-19 information, really quickly.
Okay, great. And I think what we'll do, if it's okay with everyone, I'll get Mahir to explain Timatic alerts, and then after that we will pause for questions on what we have discussed so far. Mahir, over to you.
Anish, sorry, I think one important information, because Jonathan just asked that question, and as you can see, there's a timestamp on the left-hand corner. And we decided also with the news text we had before, this page will be updated every 15 minutes. During these 15 minutes, we could have a lot of updates, but every 15 minutes, it's taking the real data and is publishing this. Hopefully that answers the question.
Great. Thank you, Maren. All right, Mahir, and then once Mahir finishes, then we'll pause for more questions. Okay, Mahir, over to you.
Thanks, Anish. As all of my colleagues actually mentioned, with COVID-19, we started actually putting the information on the website. We started sourcing for a little bit more information on flight suspension and everything else that will help the industry. But of course, with everything that is already published in Timatic, as well as published on IATA Travel Centre, there are still some obstacles to basically use that information in the purposes that the airlines are looking for. So one of the first things that actually came up was when the industry is restarting, how do I do my route planning? Where do I start first? So for that, I need to know when the regulations are going to be ending, and I need to be able to track changes in terms of how the regulations are changing, right? So it's not just about publishing the information. I need to be able to keep track of all the changes. And since it's quite rapidly changing, that became really important. Another one, and based on the questions, we all know that it is about the crew assignment. That was an important need as well. Of course, Timatic already publishes that information, but with COVID-19 restrictions and of course how, again, rapidly it changes, does it apply to crew? Is an important granular information, and how do I use that information right away? Because if you think about how Timatic works, it's based on you ask a question to Timatic and you get an answer. And even if the information is published on IATA Travel Centre, you would need to read it and then understand. So you need to apply context and you need to apply the granularity yourself. So based on all this demand, and of course, informing the traveler, because when the industry is restarting, as Celine mentioned, one of the most important things is going to be creating the trust again. And of course, the travelers will be looking for the information. So with all this demand and how Timatic is based on how it works, is not actually responding to those demands, especially in terms of keeping track of the changes, as well as pushing out the information rather than the airlines coming onto the web page or asking questions to Timatic and getting a response. We thought, how do we do that and we have been working on this for a while now. It's almost like 2-3 weeks, and it's still under development. But the idea was basically whenever there is an update on COVID-19 restrictions specifically, we first, of course, publish that information in Timatic, and right after that, our editing team will be going into some manual work and apply granularity on it. So what do I mean by that? The first thing that they will be doing is to basically answer simple questions like, here is the regulation text, here is the old regulation text, and we need to write something that explains the context of the change. So not only you will see the old and the new regulation with thematic alerts, you will also understand what has changed based on our comments. The second thing is we will apply granularity on it, meaning that the editing team will be answering questions like yes, no questions, like does it apply to crew? Does it apply to residents and citizens? Is there a quarantine? Is there a flight suspension, etc.? So like yes, no questions, that will make it machine readable. And at the end of all of this, as soon as there's an update and these questions are answered, because that's going to be our procedure, we will be sending out to an email or an RSS feed. We'll be pushing out an RSS feed or an email with this update for that particular country. So it would be quite granular. You wouldn't need to go through the whole list to try and compare what has changed and everything. You will be getting a single you will be getting information about that particular country, what has changed, and what is the granular data that you would be looking for. So that's what we call thematic alerts. Of course, this is only for COVID-19 restrictions at the moment. It does not say anything about whether you need a visa or a passport. But with COVID-19 alerts, we are still working on this. As soon as this is done, we're going to be reaching out to all of our thematic customers, and it's going to be for free of charge for everyone. So you wouldn't need to subscribe to anything. We'll reach out to you, and as soon as you confirm, we'll just put in your email address there, and you will start getting these push notifications from us regarding whatever has changed with the granular data. And that's what we're talking about when we say thematic alerts. That's all from me, Anish.
Okay, very good. What I'd like to do is I'd like to pause over here just to see if anyone has any questions to what Jody, Beata, Maren, or Mahir presented. We've seen some questions in the chat and we are answering them as we are going through, but does anyone have any questions they want to raise now to the team? Okay, great. Keep your questions coming. I just muted myself. Keep your questions coming in on the chat. I'll just give a quick update on Timatic 4. So, as you know, we have been working on the new version of Timatic. The RFP has been issued to 6 vendors. We are now going through the RFP process to get proposals back from the vendors. The critical thing over here is we will be engaging in a migration planning activity, and I'll get Mahir to explain a little bit, give a few more words on that. But our go live plan is by mid 2021. You see the key drivers on the screen, but importantly for us is to explain a little bit on the migration planning, and for that I give it to Mahir.
Thanks, Anish. Sorry, I was actually supposed to continue here, but migration planning is going to be important. We just need to give you a heads up in terms of what's coming up early 2021, because when we are building Timatic from scratch, we are thinking about doing it completely backwards compatible, so that you as the airlines do not need to change anything. But of course, in the best case scenario, it will still require an endpoint change. What do I mean by that? You will need to like instead of targeting A, you would need to target B, because we're gonna need to, of course, change where it is hosted. Well, depending on how it goes, of course, there might not be no changes required, but this is most this is this is a heads up in terms of what you could be expecting. We will be reaching out to you within this year regarding the planning of such migration. It's not too much actually in terms of resource planning on your part. We are not talking about software development. We are just talking about an endpoint change. But it will still be important that you are ready for this when we reach out to you, and then we can plan this together for the early part of 2021. That's all we have to say on Timatic 4, I guess.
Okay, great. Can everyone see the screen? I've got some questions where people are saying they can't see the screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I think maybe some specific problems. Okay, let's move on. There's a couple of discussion topics which I'd want to cover, and then towards the end, Merun will talk a bit on the user forum, which we still have on our agenda, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. Okay, a couple of discussion topics. There's two which we have identified. I get Corinne to talk about, in quotes, the immunity passport, which Celine was referencing, intra-Schengen travel, and then we'll try and address some questions that you had sent through or any other questions that you may have. So Corinne, do you want to pick up the next one?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So yes, as we are all most probably aware, we have been hearing talks in the last few weeks about a COVID immunity passport. Those passports could be potentially used and issued rather after the countries start easing the COVID-19 restrictions. At this point, and even if very little is known about this passport, we wanted to let you know and reassure you that the Timatic team has looked into different options, and if an immunity passport does come into existence, it could be handled within the existing Timatic products. So one of the ideas which came up would be to add this immunity passport in the passport section. So either as a restriction or displayed as an information only. The other possibility we thought of would be to add it in the health section of Timatic. Of course, the end result will have to be more defined as soon as this document is actually issued. We would then have to have a look at this document. Would it be machine readable? Is it going to be issued in a standard and international recognized way? Those are the types of questions and answers we're looking for in order to finalize the solution which would work for the Timatic users. It may still be a bit early today to have a final solution, but we'd like to hear your point of view on this subject. How do you see this document being used in Timatic? Do you have any first thoughts on where in Timatic we could publish this information? For example, would you prefer to have more restrictive responses, which would then trigger the okay, not okay responses? Or do you think it could be sufficient if it's only displayed as an information, and in this case would not trigger the okay, not okay responses? So yeah, we would like to hear a little bit more. So if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead.
Any questions to Corinne or the team on, and as Celine said, the immunity passports, it's not defined whether it's happening or not happening. But what we wanted to assure you that if it does happen, it would be something that Timatic is able to handle. We're hearing that, yes, Emily from Lufthansa, as you see in the chat, debatable if it will come. Rob, electronic in line with digital passport and One ID. Does anyone have anything they want to add before I move on to the next section? Okay, let's move on to the next one, which I personally find rather interesting. Beata.
All right, Intra-Schengen travel. So I guess everyone knows Schengen area is a group of countries who normally don't perform the border controls between the member states, but of course due to COVID-19 now there have been some changes. This means that Schengen is not anymore 100% borderless area as it used to be before COVID outbreak. Some countries from the Schengen group actually started implementing some entry regulations for the passengers who are traveling between the two Schengen member states. And so what does that mean from thematic perspective? It means that trips between some of the Schengen member states should no longer be considered domestic as they used to be until now. And this is why we are currently looking into what is the best way to display this information to thematic users. Just so you know, this new solution will lead to some changes in thematic responses. So in cases where in the past you have not seen any entry regulations, you will probably see the text display depending on the country. And I'm sorry if you hear some background noise, but of course my neighbor had to decide to drill something right now, so sorry for that. So yes, if you are not sure how this new solution would work for you, how it would affect you in thematic, please reach out to us. Also, if you would like to perhaps volunteer even to test this new solution with us, you are more than welcome. This would probably happen in the next couple of weeks. And yes, before we go ahead, we are interested in your feedback, any questions or suggestions that you have on this topic.
So, does anyone have any views on something which is happening already?
Yeah, it's Amelie. I just made a comment in the chat. Will residence documents be processed? Because right now, I checked it, every Schengen country allows the entry of its own nationals and own lawful residents. So, but currently we receive only for nationals an okay to board. Anything else will receive a do not board. And this means extra work for our check-in agents. So can we see an improvement on residence documents once they are submitted?
Hi, Emily. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. This is Downing from the editing team. Yeah, indeed, we are aware of that matter, and we are now looking into it and trying to come up with a solution for that. But yeah. Of course, this is also because each Schengen member state is implementing a little bit different regulations as well. Sometimes the residency documents must meet certain requirements. For example, it must be permanent residence document, or it must have been issued before a certain date. Due to this inconsistency, so sometimes the response might not be the same for each single country, but we are looking into it now and we'll get back to you.
Okay, fine, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Great. All right. Any other questions? Which brings me, we are more or less moving to the closure of the presentation, but do you have any other questions? We will try and pick up a couple of questions from the chat, but does anyone on the line have questions for us?
Another one. I mentioned it before. It's about the conditional responses we have seen now during the COVID phase. I would like to suggest improvements in the wording, because you all know we have with Amadeus and the ADC, we have a system with conditional responses that only allows to answer yes or no. Now, we have seen responses where it says visa, for example, visa required except for, and then come 5, 6, 7 paragraphs. Paragraph 1, you would say yes to get an okay to board. To paragraph 2, you would say no to get an okay to board. And again, 3 would be yes, 4 would be no. in the end, it says, can you confirm the condition is met? What would you answer? So I would like to suggest improvements that at least it should be all yes to get the okay to board, or all no to get the okay to board, whatever is feasible. Right now, it's complicated, even for our check-in agents.
Yes, Amelie, we are going to actually follow up with you separately on this one, because it also has to do with the technical part of it. So it's actually a mix of the text itself and how the system works. But we probably schedule a separate meeting for this.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. I know there's many questions, and like I said, I think we will unfortunately run out of time, but we'll take maybe one or two more questions before we move to closing the call. Second last question from someone. Don't be shy. Maybe we won't have any second last question. Last question from someone. Okay. Like I said, we have some questions which we will. So what we will do is summarize. The deck will be shared, of course, with everyone, and we will attempt to answer the questions that were left in the chat. It's a bit difficult for me to follow because there's so many of them scrolling up and down. Before I close, I want to give the floor to Maren to provide an update on the user forum and what our thoughts are on it. Maren, maybe a couple of words on that before we close.
Yes, just a couple of words about the user forum. As you know, we scheduled this user forum, unfortunately, in Bangkok, and we cannot go there, I guess, in September. So we still stick to the dates 15th and until 17th of September 2020. However, as we know, there are still restrictions, and I'm sure all of you also have restrictions in terms of travel budget. We thought of looking into the option of having a virtual user forum. And of course, maybe if some of you can travel, we were thinking even if you can join, maybe to come to Amsterdam, but this is still a question mark. And as we don't know until then if we can have bigger meetings, more than 50 people. So there are a lot of question marks. But of course, we don't want to skip the user forum. And as you know, especially we don't have enough time during these 1-hour sessions in the community call. So we still want to schedule definitely the 2 days, which we blocked in September. But again, we look into the option of having an interactive meeting. So who knows which system we use, but we would like to see, of course, faces. And not just like chats. So we hope to find a solution that we still exchange on a different level. I hope this is in everyone's interest, and please keep these dates blocked.
Very good. Thank you, Maren. Okay, and with that, unfortunately, the 1 hour just flew. I wish we could have longer chats, but we always feel that it's better that we keep the communication going, even it may be short periods. The next quarterly call will be in mid-August. We will send reminders closer to the date. But like I said at the top of the call, stay safe, stay strong. Green shoots are appearing. Things are improving slowly but surely. Things are improving. So we look forward to talking to you and hopefully even seeing you face to face sometime soon. So take care, and we'll be in touch. And any questions, you know where to get hold of us. Thank you very much.